Hi, this is Jordan for ScienceFiction.com, and I'm here with critically acclaimed comic book writer Peter David.
Hi.
Hi, Peter. So the rumors of a new Spider-Man 2099 series was circulating for a while, and then before they actually started, how did the book and your involvement with that come about?
How did the book what?
How did the book and your involvement with that come about?
The book came about because Steve Wacker, who was departing the Marvel editorial, wrote a final kind of goodbye column. And one of the things he mentioned was that editor Ellie Pyle was working on a Spider-Man 2099 book.
Yeah.
The internet lit up about this information, and in one of the few occasions that I can think of, the internet basically actually agreed on one simple point, which was we would totally buy a new 2099 book as long as Peter David is writing it. They were, people were basically saying they had no interest if anyone else was writing it. And at the time, it didn't have an assigned writer. And Dan Slott kept saying, have you contacted Peter? And they're going like, yeah, we'll get to it. And then eventually, my suspicion is that the internet's uniform agreeing that I should be the one who writes it got Marvel to go, yeah, you know what, we should ask Peter to write it. In the meantime, I'd been getting tons of emails, and I was telling everyone, no, I'm not writing it. I'm sure that whoever they get is going to do a fine job. And then I get a phone call from Ellie Pyle, and she says, so, you want to write Spider-Man 2099? And I went, oh, okay, yeah, sure. When is the first issue coming out? And she said, July. And I went, July? It's May. And she said, yeah, you're really late. And we also need a 5-page story to run in Spider-Man 700, and we need that, like, today. So, I just kind of threw myself into it. I had no idea where I was going. I just started writing because I had no time to think.
So Dan sort of gave you some setup in Spider-Man for that.
Yes.
And, to what extent did he contribute to the initial setup for the series? And,
Well,
was it a team effort or something more you pitched?
No. I pitched. They came to me. They came to me, and there was no pitch. There was no where you're going to go. It's like, do you want to write this? Okay. You're going to be doing several issues, and then we're going to go into Spider-Verse. And I was going to work with Dan on coming up with plots for the Spider-Verse so it would all interact. And then we're going to go out of Spider-Verse. And it was all just very kind of surprising. I mean, the only reason that Spider-Man 29 happened was because Dan brought him into Superior Spider-Man. Something which I had absolutely no warning that he was going to do. It's just, I suddenly started getting emails from people going, so what do you think of Spider-Man 2099 being in Superior Spider-Man? And I'm going, what? It was all news to me.
Yeah. So you returned to writing the character after 20 years. Do you feel like your approach to writing him has changed at all in the interim?
No, he's still the same guy. Miguel hasn't really changed all that much. He's very much the way that he was in my head. So no, it's really been no effort returning to him.
And more of a general question, how do you feel the sort of approach to writing comics and all that has changed during the course of your career?
My approach? I suppose that I have been impacted by comics that other people are doing. I have less dialogue, less captions. I try to work more to let the artwork tell the story as much as possible. Also, I used to write comic books in what's called Marvel style, which was I write them in they're kind of like short stories written in present tense, and I would leave the story breakdown to the artist. Now I write them in full script, and I detail every single panel, so I have much more control over the story and the storytelling and the pacing.
Nice. So dialing things back a little bit as far as your career, you've had a lot of involvement with the classic Young Justice comics, and then more recently with the unfortunately canceled television series.
I did.
What are your thoughts on the ongoing fan battle to bring the show back?
It's not going to happen. They canceled the series because, believe it or not, the toys didn't sell, which I think is, utterly moronic. But, that's why Ben 10 keeps going, because the Ben 10 toys keep selling. And that's why cartoons on Cartoon Network get canceled, because the toys don't sell. And which is tremendously upsetting to me, because number one, I thought the toys were kind of cool, and number two, that really is the case of the tail wagging the dog. But nobody asked me. I'm sure that Greg Weisman and Brandon Vietti would be perfectly happy to come back to Young Justice. but I don't think the fan reaction is going to get anywhere.
Now, how do you feel that the show translated the comics? Like, do you feel like they did a good job translating it from one era to the next?
I don't think it translated the comics at all. I mean, yes, it was called Young Justice, although the team never called themselves that. The only time that words Young Justice were used were in the title of the series. The characters, the execution was all very different. It was much more adult rather than the tongue-in-cheek young adult comic book that I was writing.
Yeah. Now, do you think a new Young Justice comic would work now that DC's sort of redoing everything in the wake of Convergence?
I think a new Young Justice comic would absolutely work. The old Young Justice comic was working. It's just that DC felt they didn't need to do a book that was geared towards younger readers, which I think is idiotic. The concept was that we had the books that were for really young readers, like Scooby-Doo and all that kind of thing, and Young Justice was geared toward younger readers and would serve for them to read, and then they could graduate, quote unquote, into Teen Titans, the older books. Which is exactly what was happening. Many people told me that Young Justice was their first DC comic.
Actually,
and that, there you go. And that they really read it and loved it, and then they graduated as it was up into Teen Titans. I think that displaying an interest in getting new readers is something that every comic book company should be actively doing. And I think it's a shame that DC stopped doing it.
Now, are there any characters you'd like to work on that you haven't had a chance to yet, or better yet, are there any industry people you'd like to work with but haven't gotten a chance to yet?
In terms of characters, I never answered that question. The reason being that I'm concerned about fan reaction. I mean, to pick a character arbitrarily. Let's say, oh yeah, I'd love to write Thor. Thor would be a great character. What's going to happen is that's going to be translated by some fans into Peter David hates what's happening with Thor right now and wants to be able to write it. I don't need that aggravation. So that's just like a question that I never really answer.
Sure.
In terms of people I would like to work with, I swear to God, at this point, I've worked with everybody I could possibly want to work with. I'm interested in seeing, who's coming up now that I can work with, the new folks. But in terms of the classic guys, I've worked with them all.
Yes. And do you have any upcoming projects you'd like to share with us, be it novels, comics, or what's really next for Peter David?
Well, I'm doing several books that tie in with the Secret Wars series from Marvel Comics. I'm doing one called Future Imperfect that spins off of my original two-part Future Imperfect with George Perez.
Yep.
This one's being penciled by Greg Land, and he's doing a terrific job. And I'm doing a Marvel 2099 that's focusing on the Avengers of the year 2099.
Nice.
And Will Sliney, who's my artist on Spider-Man, is drawing that. And that's really shaping up wonderfully.
That sounds really great.
It's exciting. In the meantime, I'm also doing Stephen King's Dark Tower and having a lot of fun doing that.